So the final question, the fourth question, which gets us all the way to the Christian God is the New Testament reliable enough to show us that Jesus rose from the dead?
No! Sorry, that was a long answer. No. For a more verbose answer, the New Testament is not. So the New Testament, you have Paul's writings, his epistles. He got his information from the scriptures as well as visions that he had. Right, so you could call them hallucinations if you wanted to, but visions is where he got his information about Jesus. So that's Paul, and then of course the gospel writers, they were using Paul, but also they were making a whole bunch of shit up. And there's a whole bunch of reasons to think this. All of the gospels were anonymous, and each gospel was meant to be the gospel of Jesus Christ, not like just a different point of view or anything like that. So each one's supposed to replace the others and be the central gospel. And so these weren't people that were writing history. And then everything after that point really doesn't fucking matter, because as far as like whether or not Christianity's true, because Christianity really hinges on Jesus Christ and his sacrifice and resurrection, and right? Anything after that, like, you know, I guess after Acts, is all just sort of theology that's going on there. Not that previously it wasn't theology. I'm just saying, like, there's nothing that could be tied to history after, really after Paul, but after, I guess you could say, Acts. Acts is historical fiction. The Gospel of Mark was actually meant to be like a missionary manual, teaching missionaries how to witness to people and things to expect while they're witnessing to people and all this other shit, all the while teaching the basic story that they've concocted for Jesus. So is the New Testament reliable enough to show us that Jesus rose from the dead? No. Jesus rising from the dead in the manner in which the Gospels portray him in is a magical event. And since we do not have any kind of indication that magic is real, this magical event most likely did not happen. But also the only person that could reliably account for anything at this point in time is Paul, and he got his information through a vision which came from directly from the risen Jesus. That's what you're talking about here. Just to point that out here, we're talking about Paul having a vision and then everybody believing his vision is true. Of course, there were other Christians prior to Paul, so it was already a well-established theology before Paul came into it. But as far as modern Christianity goes, Paul is kind of the father of that. So whatever came before, we're not exactly sure what that was, but we do know that the earliest version of the theology is Paul's theology. And so that's kind of why I heavily rely on Paul here as far as like, what do we know about Jesus and historical reliability about the Gospels and everything like that. Just to recap here, we've got our equation so far for determining that Christianity is true is a basic axiom that doesn't actually prove anything. Shitty argument for God, magic exists, and then as kind of like a part B here or part A or something like that. If magic exists and if God exists, then Jesus could have rose from the dead. Of course, I guess he's going to bank on his whole idea of historical reliability. So he's trying to ground this outside of magic, but all of this is still very much grounded in magic.
The reason we believe in Christianity is because an event occurred, the resurrection. Now, I have to ask you this. Why would the Jewish writers of the New Testament, all were Jewish with the exception of Luke, why would they invent a resurrected Jesus?
So this whole resurrection business actually was worked into Ezekiel 37, and this comes from, various ideas in the surrounding area, mainly these mystery cults that were going around. They all had savior figures that died and then resurrected and promised everybody that believed and worshiped them new life as long as they got baptized and promised to follow them for the rest of their days or whatever. So, I mean, that was going on, and the Jews kind of co-opted some of that and syncretized it with the Jewish religion. Right there in Ezekiel about 37 is where we actually see these bodily resurrections theology kind of come in there. And then if you fast forward a little bit from Ezekiel, you have a bunch of Jews that are trying to look for this coming Messiah that supposedly is prophesied. They have a number of different individuals that they peg as being the Messiah, and they use like the Daniel a lot, as well as, Ezekiel and all these other scriptures in order to figure out things about this Messiah. At one point in time, Onias III is pegged as being the Messiah, but he ends up dying. And of course, the Jews at that time created a pesherim in order to explain why their Messiah died, which would be Isaiah 53, the suffering servant. And then if you fast forward a little bit more, you have the Jews that were expecting a Messiah due to some weird mathematical numerology type shit going on with the Daniel passages and predicting when the Messiah was going to come. They basically thought that the Messiah was going to come around the 1st century BCE or 1st century CE. When that Messiah did not come, they went searching through the scriptures and everything to figure out what in the fuck happened. And therefore, that's how they get this suffering and dying Messiah that, eventually became Jesus. Now, I know that this sounds very mythicisty. I'm not trying to say that Jesus didn't exist. There could have been some fuck that they just attributed all of these things to, and they just affixed it to him, or the dude could have thought, oh, I'm the Messiah, and then he went and did things and got executed by the Romans, I guess. Of course, obviously I am a mythicist, so I don't think that happened, but more importantly, I feel like it's necessary to point out that either situation could have happened, and so this is just an explanation as to why they would have made up a suffering and dying Messiah, because Frank seems to think that this is sort of out of character for the Jews to believe this kind of thing, when in fact this was deeply rooted in Jewish theology, and this idea had been in the Jewish community for more than 100 years prior to them claiming it about Jesus. Could the Jews have fabricated this? Of course they could. They could have just read the scriptures and read these past pesherim, and they could have come up with it. So this is not actually outside of the realm of possibility. Frank is just very behind on his scholarship. Now, obviously, I don't think that Frank cares about modern scholarship. I think that he clings to opinions that he already agrees with. This is very obvious by him not even touching on the other experts in the field that disagree with his assertion. And anybody that's going to disagree with the experts in the field that firmly state that the suffering and dying Messiah motif was already in the Jewish community, then I feel like you're doing apologetics. Regardless of your persuasion, a Christian, atheist, it doesn't matter. You're doing apologetics at that point.